Cash Flow Diary Podcast, episode 436.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cash Flow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because we are going to talk about something that is affecting each and every one of you. You're like, what is that? Well, here's the thing. The day one when you're in business, you don't know much, and you have to go out there. You got to grab some skills. You got to get better. And then maybe you do. You get better, and then you're like, ooh, what's next? Well, get better. And then after you get better again, you're like, but I'm still not at the top of my game. So what do? You do your best to, well, get better. But let me ask you a question. What happens when you're the best? Do you still have a reason to keep getting better? Do you still pursue yourself just as hard? How does that work? And I think today's guest is going to be able to help you and I understand that exact process and everything else that goes along with it. He's the author of numerous books, his newest called The Potential Principle. I think you're going to enjoy it. Here's why. Because you're going to learn things about you and about things that you should do at every level in your organization to make sure that you develop leaders. In fact, he likes to say that he likes to help create leaders at every level and turning ordinary into extraordinary. I'm talking about none other than Mark Sanborn. He is the president of Sanborn Associates, an ideal lab for leadership development. Now, here's the thing. You may be familiar with him from the Fred Factor or Fred 2.0, but what I want you to do is I want you to pay strict attention to the new things that he's bringing to you and I today. So help me welcome Mark Sanborn. Mark, you there?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, Jay. It's great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad that you are here because you were talking about actually one of my most favorite topics, because it's one of those things that affects, I think, every business owner at every level. Now, before we get too far into it, though, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, like Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them, occasionally as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself as possibly getting dressed up and thinking like, hey, I got a cape on and I'm going to go save people today. But also, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. For example, Spider-Man. There was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos, and then one day he gets bit by a spider and discovers, I've got a special ability, and he gets to choose, do I get to use it for good or evil? So, my question to you is as follows. Before all of your, New York Times, Business Week, Wall Street Journal bestseller books, before working with all the clients that you've worked with, like Harley Davidson, Cisco, ESPN, etc., before even, your books, like we've talked about a second ago, what we want to know is, who is Mark Sanborn?
Well, I can tell you when I got bit by the spider, metaphorically. I was 10 years old, and I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm kid. Now, at the age of 10, I was an overweight kid with no athletic ability who did well in school. And if you think back to grade school, that's like a trifecta for getting beat up every day.
Right.
I did not have this kind of bucolic childhood because I was a jock or, because I was a good-looking kid that all the girls dug. But what I did have was the ability to think well. And when I was in my 4-H club, which is still a huge organization serving young people all over the United States, when I was in 4-H, my club needed someone to represent them in the public speaking contest. And they thought, hey, Sanborn has the ability to memorize things, and they kind of nominated me. And so long story short, without taking too long a stroll down memory lane, my first 5-minute speech was so bad, was so abysmal, so humiliating that I made a very important decision in my life. And this was the spider bite. Instead of saying, doesn't matter, stupid contest, been there, done that, I'll do something different. For some reason, I said, this really matters to me. I want to learn how to do this. I want to craft the ability to write a good speech, to give a good speech. And I threw myself into learning everything I could, studying public speaking. Now, the way that affected me is obvious in that, some years later, I became a full-time professional speaker, but I learned two important things, and it drives leadership and it drives business. And the first is the ability to communicate effectively is critical. There are a lot of skills you can get by without. That's not one of them. The better you communicate, whether it's in writing or verbally or in front of a crowd, the more effective you'll be both as a leader and as an entrepreneur. And the second thing that I learned is that influence is always born with ideas that are communicated in one of the mediums. Today, social media. Back when I was 10 years old, we didn't even have personal computers yet. So I didn't know at the time, but the principle is the same, getting understood and getting people to take action. That's what communication's about. And so those two things have driven my books and my consulting and advising and speaking. And it all goes back to the age of 10 and sucking really bad at my first speech contest.
Well, I often say every master was once a disaster. So I totally get that. Now, you mentioned the skill set, though, of communication. That's not necessarily something that's taught in grade school. What if it's so necessary? What's missing? Why is that such a missing thing?
I think we have historically in our educational system taught the basics of communication, but, we've kind of lost sight of the forest for the trees. I think we teach people to write and capitalize and use good grammar. And I think sometimes, though, we miss the practical application. Most all of us communicate far more through the spoken word than we do the written word. Doesn't mean the written word isn't important, but when you think about it, mostly you learn those kinds of skills through youth organizations, vocational youth organizations or 4-H or extracurricular activities, which is why I'm a big believer in education, but I'm just as big a believer in groups like Toastmasters. Now, I didn't learn to speak in Toastmasters, but I'm asked twice a week, how do I learn to speak? And I always say, go to Toastmasters. If you've never developed public speaking skills, there's not a more cost-effective way to do it than through joining your local Toastmasters club. But, the good news is anything you want to learn, you can become an autodidact. I love that word. It just means self-taught. It means you can go out and find, and I talk about this in the new book, find the experts and find the resources and develop the skills that will set you on that path towards perpetual improvement.
Got it. So take us on this quick journey, if you will. How do we go from 4-H club, horrible public speech, to multiple books, New York Times bestseller? There's a path. I'm just assuming that it wasn't straight and that there were many parts of development along the way.
Yeah, I've always wished I could come up with a sexier answer than this, but I just was willing to work. I was willing to work harder than most other people.
Okay.
They say it's not what you know, it's who you know. No, it's what you know and how well you do it and who you know. All three of those things go together. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's ironic that so many entrepreneurs leave a traditional job to pursue their passion, and then in 3 to 5 years, their business has grown so much that they're miserable. They've gone from running their business, and I'm sure you've said and seen this, to letting their business run them. And I was focused on what I did best and liked best, and then everything else was secondary. And I had this kind of crazy belief that if I became a very, very good communicator, if I was really engaging on the platform, if I was able over time to write stories that people wanted to read, that everything else would follow. But it's funny, Jay, we live in a time where it sometimes seems to me that we've elevated sales and marketing above product. And that is, people think, as long as I got something to sell, that's all that matters. Well, if what you sell is ordinary, you'll never make anything more than ordinary profits. if you really want to be extraordinary, you had better make your product or your service or your client experience extraordinary. And that's really what couples my work in leadership to this turning ordinary into extraordinary. If you don't have a value proposition that is different and compelling to your customer, frankly, you're always going to compete on price. And you're always going to lose business to people who are willing to do it for a little bit less. But when you can become unique, and I don't mean unique in that nobody on the planet does it. You know, you could throw a rock and hit another professional speaker from wherever you're sitting right now. But if you don't find a way to stand out so that people go, wow, in this sea of professional speakers, or in the sea of books on the bookshelf, or in the sea of lawn care businesses, I like these guys, you're going to fail. I got a new doctor yesterday, and the reason I got a new doctor is my health insurance, my old doctor went out of plan. And I love my old doctor, but I found this new guy. And I had such a great experience, you know, that I told my friends, I told my wife. And think about it. You don't expect to go to your initial appointment at a new doctor's office and come home going, that was so fun, right?
Never have done that. Home, not even once.
No, you come home and you go, oh my God, my appointment was at 8. I saw the doctor at 9:15. He talked to me for 3 minutes. I sat around later waiting for him to finish up the paperwork. None of that happened. And the reason that I bring that up is I always tell my clients, you never talk about things you don't like or even like. You only talk about experiences you love. And the point I make is if you see a movie and it's an okay movie, you don't go out and say, hey, I just saw a movie, it's really okay. It's when you love the movie that you say to your friends, don't miss this movie. This movie is great. And so that's what I aim for. I aim for in my, it's great when I experience it with a new doc, but I aim for in my business, creating experiences, interactions that people go, that was really cool. I love that.
Right. Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because when working with a number of entrepreneurs, as I do, we often focus on a version of understanding how they're going to bring something unique to the marketplace. And because we're not the first ones to ever do buy and hold real estate. I mean, landlord is not a new term. Short-term rentals is not new. That it's been around for a long time. How can you differentiate yourself? So if someone was in a market such as that had a lot of similar, or what seems to be similar on the surface offerings, how does one communicate that? Because I'm assuming that's where you're headed, is saying somehow we as the entrepreneur have to learn, since communication is like the central skill set. We have to learn not only how to communicate that to our customer, but we've got to communicate that to our team.
Indeed. And, a couple of things that are so important, I don't want to convolute it, but culture always precedes brand. If you don't create a culture that is crystal clear on what it is you do and do better than your competition, then you're missing out. You've got to start with your culture, whether it's a culture of one, you're making $10, or you've got a team of 50 and you're making 10 million. In my book, The Fred Factor, one of the 4 skills I talk about, and frankly, it's one of my favorite, I just get jazzed more about this perhaps than anything else, is I say, you've got to add value to everything you do, and it doesn't have to cost a nickel. You've got to learn to create value without just throwing money at it. Anybody can buy a customer's loyalty. At Christmas, instead of sending them a can of popcorn, you can send them a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle that cost you $5, right? But that's not creative, because even though they may appreciate the expensive bourbon, you just spend $500 to deliver it. What I like to do is look at ways that you can change your business model or your delivery that it's demonstrably more valued by the customer, but it didn't cost you that much. And I'll give you a big example, and I'll give you a little example. Let's look at taxis. And you know where I'm going with this.
I think I do.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody just said to me, hey, reinvent taxis, I'd have said, nah, that's one of those old school things. And until George Jetson picks us up in his hovermobile, we're always going to have taxis. Well, only 8% of business travelers use taxis now.
Right.
That's got to be tough if you drive a taxi. But Uber looked at some things and said, let's have a distributed workforce. Let's find a way around paying a lot of money for a medallion, driving a car that's fallen apart and dirty. Let's find a way so that people can get quick service less expensively, and let's create a mechanism that keeps everybody honest, and we'll give them a chance to evaluate you as a passenger, not just you evaluate them as a driver. You know, and Uber is so pervasive now and so well known. I won't beat the obvious, but whenever somebody says, yeah, you know, you can't reinvent that, I say, oh, really? Well, what about Uber? But let's look at a little level. You say, you know, I haven't come up with that big industry changing technology or business model. Let's say you run a restaurant. My brother's a restaurant guy. He not only owns and operates, but he buys and sells for others. And I know a little bit more than the average person about the restaurant business. Mm-hmm. Well, let's say you're in your favorite pub, and normally the service is good, but this particular night, it's taken forever for the food to come out. And you say, can I see the manager? And the manager comes over and says, what's the problem? You say, oh, man, you know, I've been here since, you know, I've celebrated a birthday waiting for my hamburger. What's going on? And the manager says, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me go check on your order. And he comes back and says it'll be right out. Well, even if it comes right out, he hadn't done anything. He hadn't created any value. He's just kept you from, you know, leaving perhaps. A craft beer, I'm not talking about Bud Light or Miller Lite, but a craft beer, a good beer, costs the restaurant maybe 40 to 70 cents to pour. That's the beer they charge you $6 for. Mm-hmm. What would happen if the manager said, sir, I am so sorry you're waiting on your burger. I'll tell you what, I can't make the burger come out before it has, but what I can do, let me buy you a beer to make your wait a little better. Well, you just got a free $6 beer. They just spent 50 cents, and you're happier than you were before your food was delayed. Hell, I'll wait an extra 5 minutes if I get a free beer.
Right.
And that's where we miss the obvious. I mean, think about it. You say, well, Mark, yeah, that's obvious. Well, yeah. So how many times has a manager comped you a drink or a beer when you had a complaint? I can count on one hand, and I eat out about every day of the week. We just don't think about what are the things that cost us little that the customer values much. And that's where we have an opportunity to create value.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things that we've done, like with our short-term rental portfolio, is we tend to cater towards people who travel with small children. So having had small children and being a father of many children.
And having been a small child.
Yeah, right. All of those things. Children come with equipment, and you've got to travel with that stuff. And it's like, man, I hate that. So we often will provide things like a pack and play, a stroller, high chair, at no additional cost. And we just let people know that that's there because, hey, I know you're coming with kids. And because of that, instead of charging you $20, $30, $40 extra or whatever, it's already right here. You know, you don't even have to, you can leave that stuff at home. And I think that's what you're talking about.
I am. And you know what? It's interesting because it's a deductible business expense that you can embed in the overall price. And what I find fascinating is,
don't tell them that. Don't tell them my secret. That was.
I'm sorry. But
nah,
think about this
for
years. There's even hotels still that'll charge you $1 for a phone call. And so you stay at a nice hotel and it costs you $300 a night, and you check out and it's like, oh, you made 2 local phone calls and you owe us an extra $2.12. I always say, bundle it. Say it's going to cost you $305 to stay here, and say, but the good news is you can make as many local phone calls as you want.
Right.
But we nickel and dime people. I've never had it. Nobody's going to walk away because they pay $305 instead of $300. and yet we nickel and dime people. And I've said, and when I check out, how was your stay? I said, it was great, except, well, you know, why'd you jam me $2? Or why internet? Now, it does cost hotels. There is a hard cost to internet. But again, bundle it and call it free. So now you're up to $315, but you got free phone call and free internet.
Right.
And it's about thinking about how to create value rather than just how to a la carte charge more. And you're right, Jay. When you solve people's problems, when you minimize brain damage, there's a lot of us, especially, and I've got teenage kids, but I remember I'd pay just about anything to minimize the brain damage of traveling with kids.
Right. Totally. It was always worth it. It's like, man, I don't have to carry that stroller through the airport. Yeah, I'm in at almost any price. So totally understood. Now, take us up to the potential principle. What's it about? What is the potential principle? And I want to know, do I have it? I mean, help me out. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey. I know that if you've ever gone over to the site, cashflowdiary.com, you may have asked yourself, where on earth do you get a domain name from? Especially as you are beginning to build your bigger, better, badder business, you need a web presence. You need the email address. You need a way for people to contact you electronically so that you can stop doing the @gmail.com game. Well, the good folks over at GoDaddy have definitely supplied us with every domain that we have ever used. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary. Again, that's trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary, because it's a quick way for you to get set up to capture your domain name the exact way that you want it. They got easy search functions, and most importantly for you is that you'll be up and running today. As I said, once you get started, stay started. Don't let small little obstacles of how to get your own domain name going stop you. So again, go to trygodaddy.com/cashflowdiary, and let's get back to the rest of the story.
Well, I can help you and your listeners answer the question about whether you have more potential. And that is, if today I said to you, this is as good as life's ever going to get, it's all downhill from here, you'll never get better, would you be happy? And I've yet to have anybody go, yeah, I'd be okay with that. Because deep down inside, we all want to think that we're going to make a little more money, have better relationships, more pleasurable experiences. In other words, we assume that life's going to get better. Where the disconnect is a lot of people don't do anything intentionally every day to make their life better. I've met a lot of successful people. I've met a few billionaires, got to know one pretty well before he passed away. And I've never met anybody that could convince me that they had maximized their potential, that they were firing at 100%. There was not a thing more they could do. Generally, just the opposite. It seems like the more successful people become, the more potential they realize they have. So the potential principle is this. We all know how good we've become. None of us know how good we could be. And that's good news, because that means that if we choose, we can continue to get better. So we did some raw research, primary research for the book, and we found that 80% of the people we interviewed said they had the intention, if not a commitment, to get better. Only 30% of them had a plan. Awareness without action is futile. You can be aware that you want to make more money, improve your cash flow, increase your net worth, but if you don't take action, this isn't some kind of mamby-pamby, mumbo-jumbo new age thing. Awareness and action go together. So what I wanted to do is write a book that would give, for those people that said, I want to get better, don't have a plan, don't have a process. And certainly my book is one of the few about this particular topic, but it's not the only approach out there. But I took my years of working with really successful people, my own experiences, and I identified 4 places you need to get better and 4 ways to do it. It's pretty much 4 places where you can improve and 4 ways to do it. Mm-hmm. And, in the time we have, we can talk about a few of them, but I'll just kind of kick it off with what I think my clients think is.
Yeah. Before we go there, hold on. I want to stop it just for one quick second, because there's something that you said that is triggering a thought in my head when you said the idea that we can always get better, which I get that. We're not, even when we've accomplished XYZ, there's still another level. What would you say to those that feel like or believe that there is an endpoint to my getting better? I mean, because you said that you would be able to argue that no, there's still more, that you are still capable of more, when yet I think for many people, especially those listening and inspiring or just getting their business started, there's this level where they go, okay, if I just get there, I just want to get right there. I get right there and I'm done, quote unquote. What would you say to that person?
Well, first of all, it's a great question, and the good news is nobody has to get better. This is optional. This is not obligatory. Matter of fact, I've never met anyone that got better because they had to. Right? I mean, you've got kids. Try that. See how that works. Try to make your kids get better at anything, and human nature is they'll make it a point to push back because you want them to be better at that. You can encourage, right. You can inspire. You know, one of my big pet peeves is every once in a while I'll read somebody say this book will change your life, or I'll change your life, and no, you won't. People come up to me, and I'm gratified. I'm absolutely delighted when they say your book changed my life, but I'm always clear with them. No, you changed your life. Right. My book inspired you. Maybe it encouraged you, and hopefully it gave you some ideas, but I didn't change your life. I can't change. I have a hard enough time changing my life. You changed your life. And right. So what we do, Jay, what you and I do is we give people a lot of things that will help them change their lives. But at the end of the day, you change your own life, or you keep your own life the same. So first is you don't have to get better. I do think, personally, I think that we kind of have a genetic imprint to keep getting better. And what I think happens with entrepreneurs is they don't get to the point where they say, I couldn't be any better. They get to the point where they say, in this business, I don't want to be any better, which is very different, because you might say, you know what, I had a great run and I love this business, but it's not as fun as it was. I'm going to sell it. But, right now I have some causes, some philanthropy or some charities that mean a lot to me. And so you focus your attention there. So at the beginning of the book, one of the early questions I ask is, better at what? This isn't just about a generic overall improving every aspect of your life. Really, I think it's most effective when you focus it on being a better parent, being a better investor, being a better entrepreneur, being a better leader. You pick. What's important to the individual reader and the listener of your show is unique to them. But what this is the process. So you say, if I want to be a better parent, I'm going to look at how changing my thinking and my behavior and how my learning, how I can learn some parenting skills, and I'm going to reflect more so that I get to understand my kids better. The truth is transferable. So what I talk about in this book isn't for the perpetually unhappy, discontent person. It's for the person that simply says, hey, I've got a new challenge, or I want to get better in an existing challenge.
Got it. What's interesting, I'm trying to envision myself saying, I don't want to be any better. I'm trying to envision that. I'm like, what does that even look like? How could it speaks of a level of satisfaction with your accomplishments that I don't even understand yet.
No, nor do I. It actually often manifests itself as smugness. It may not be intended that way, but you meet those people who are just so positively content with who they are that they give off this vibe that, you too could be great like me.
Oh, wow.
I think that the key, I call it positive discontent. Enjoy who you are. Be proud of who you are. Just don't be content with it. The problem is when we do one or the other. If we're only proud of what we've accomplished, then we have no reason to accomplish more. But if we're never happy with what we've accomplished, we're miserable. And you'll see managers do this, where whatever an employee does is never good enough. You see the anti-motivational speech at the sales meeting. You set a record at the company. Now, next month, double it. Right. You just set a record. And before you can enjoy that, I'm being, challenged with the impossible. So I say positive discontent says, be proud. Enjoy the journey for heaven's sakes. But just don't get to the point where you're content, because that's where you become complacent.
Yeah. Well, all you got to do is ask the taxi companies, right? Complacency.
Yeah, no kidding.
So awesome. Now you were mentioned there were 4 things. What can you just briefly, what are the 4 things, and then we'll pick one and we'll talk about it for a second.
Yeah, the 4 big strategies is disrupt yourself before somebody or something else does. And that goes back to, at an organizational or an industry level, the taxi business. But at a personal level, maybe we can talk about that, because that's one of my favorites. Engage others. And people say, well, yeah, I know about reading books. And hey, but think about it. When you're a beginner, you can read any book on the subject and get better. But what happens when you're so good that you know more than the people writing the books?
Right.
You've got to find an esoteric, an unusual, an unknown, a higher level resource to learn from. So there's engage others, there's expand your competencies, and that is more tools you have in your toolkit, the better you'll be. If you're an entrepreneur right now and you either don't understand social media or you haven't hired a 17-year-old part-time to do it for you, you're missing out. Let's see. The fourth one is refocus. People, I used to teach, and I still do, the importance of focus, but I realize, the big mistake we make about focus is that we get focused and then we stay focused even when everything around us changes. So the key is to refocus periodically, because if you do not refocus, you will repeat. In other words, if you say we're going to do this in our business, but you don't refocus your people on what to do, you will only repeat what they've been doing.
Right. Got it. Totally understood. So when you say disrupt yourself, though, how? Because typically disruption happens from outside.
Right. Disruption happens when you say, I'm tired of this situation. This process hasn't been effective for 9 months, and I'm going to take the responsibility to disrupt it. This relationship hasn't worked for a long time. By the way, if you don't disrupt a relationship, it'll eventually end. At work, if you don't disrupt that person who's not performing, then someday you're going to have to let them go. So what seems like, people say to me, if I disrupt my teammate, it'll be awkward. Well, awkward compared to what? Firing them in a year? If you have a relationship, a romantic relationship, and you just let it deteriorating, I guarantee I was single for 37 years. I didn't get married until I was 37. And, I was terrible. I always let relationships die a slow, painful death. And I thought I was doing my partner a favor, right? By not breaking up. And I learned too late. I was being cruel. I should have just said, you know what, this isn't working. Let's just end it happily. Instead, I let it, end with the person being so mad at me they wanted to stick a knife in my back. So that was what I learned the hard way. And that is, if you do not disrupt what needs disrupted, it will disrupt you in unpleasant ways. At a macro level, technologies can disrupt us. New competitors can disrupt us, as we've talked about. Sometimes customers can disrupt us because their expectations change, and what used to make them happy isn't making them happy anymore. So here's the question, Jay, for your listeners, and it's a simple question. It really deserves some reflection, and that is, who or what needs disrupted in your business or your life? Who or what needs disrupted in your business or your life? And it'll give you a punch list. Go for the big stuff. Don't go for the minor stuff. Go for the big disruptions, because that'll give you the biggest payback.
Yeah, I get that. It's just sometimes I think as entrepreneurs we can operate in silos, and when we need that feedback like you're talking about, because it sounds like we might not be paying attention to the feedback, because in order to recognize something needs to be disrupted, I have to be aware that there's a problem, and sometimes I'm not aware of the problems.
Well, and if you're not open to feedback, you won't get it. When you look at the leader of North Korea, do you get the impression that nobody wants to say to Kim Jong-un, yeah, that's a bad idea, boss? That will not end well. So here's a guy that, regardless of what you think about geopolitics, here's an example of a guy that is ultimately isolated. And when you're ultimately isolated, you lose touch with reality, because what you need to know, people aren't willing to tell you, because they know that if they're the messenger of bad news, you'll shoot the messenger.
Yeah, totally understood. So let me ask you this question. What would you say to the person who's probably been operating at a while? Maybe, they started out, and at the beginning they were thinking, if I can just get to 100,000 and to $1 million of revenue, and now they're on their way to 2 million and beyond, and they're thinking, how can I make the company grow, or what needs disrupting? They're listening to you right now. What's going to be what have you found to be some of the best sources to get that feedback and be able to implement the changes required?
Well, it sounds cliche, but the people doing the work will tell you. If you ask the people on your team, what one thing, if we changed it, would make the company more successful, make you happier, would make the customer happier? They got a long list, but just ask them to name the biggest thing. Everybody keeps a list. Boy, if I was boss, if this was my company, Again, you've got to have the kind of relationship where they can be honest without you, beating them up. Because the first time you ask and they tell you honestly, and then you beat them up for feeling that way, forget asking again. It's over. But what I would say I want to even take it a step further, Jay, and I would say when you're a successful entrepreneur, ask yourself, do I want to climb higher on the same ladder, or do I want to put the ladder up against a different wall? By the way, I don't believe growth is the end all. I mean, certainly we like growth if it's profitable. By the way, the roadside is littered with fast growing companies that never made money.
Right.
That's a good thing to point out. But sometimes you say, it's not just about growth. It's about the impact we make. It's about the quality of our products and services. It's about the environment that we create for our employees. I love Netflix. Not just because I like their programming and their business model, but because they've been a real pioneer in, is there a better way to work? At Netflix, you don't have working hours. You have a performance objective, and if you meet it, working a few hours or a lot of hours, that's your deal. Vacation, yeah. Last I knew, they were playing around with an unlimited vacation policy, which when you think about it is really the same as a no working hours policy. You become a results-based organization rather than an input-based organization. I mean, we all know people who are busy and haven't accomplished a damn thing. And then we know some people who are out on a yacht right now, but they're killing it. They're making more money and doing more than we are, sitting behind our desk and staring at our computer screen.
Right. Totally understood. I like the concept of potential, but it can also feel at times like I don't know, an elusive target. Because if I always have potential, when do I stop? That's the question.
Well, you stop when you feel you've achieved enough of it in that particular area. I don't believe in life balance per se. You ever see those exercises where you got like the 6 spokes of life, your health, your relationships.
Yes.
And everybody says the idea is to balance them. No, it's not, because if you balanced your life, that means you would sleep as many hours a day as you put into your relationships and you spend at the office. Life isn't balanced. Life is amazingly unbalanced. It's about how you choose to wait. I think of it as life waiting. You wait what's most important to you. If you, Jim Mattis in the news these days, a Marine beloved by pretty much everybody, he says, I never got married. The Marine Corps was my wife. And here was a guy that recognized, what? I love what I do, and the Marine Corps is my commitment. And he chose against, settling down with some woman who for him, evidently, would have been a distraction. And I admire his honesty. He didn't say to be balanced, I have to be a great Marine and a happily married guy with kids. And it's by all accounts, the guy is an amazing leader and human being. His life isn't balanced the way most people who live in the suburbs' lives are balanced, but he's very, very successful at what he does.
That's interesting that you bring up examples of complete, I guess, what would be counter to the norm, so to speak, when someone thinks of those words. Now, for those that have listened this far, because I have this feeling we could talk about topics like this for a long time, but for those who have listened this far, what would you say is going to be the best way for them to catch up with you, to find out more about what you're going on, or even grab a copy of the book?
Yeah, that's easy. MarkSanborn.com is the kind of the mothership, if you will, of all things that I write and record. I have a lot of free videos, about 70 videos in our video library, little short 2 or 3 minute segments you can listen to for ideas, or if you want, share with your team at your weekly meeting. And then if they specifically are interested in the concept of this potential principle book, and the subtitle is How to Narrow the Gap Between How Good You Are and How Good You Could Be, they can go to potentialprinciple.com, and there's a lot of information there about the book. And if they decide they want to order the book right now, because the book just launched, we have a special price and you can get an autographed copy. So those 2 places, marksanborn.com, MarkSanborn.com, and potentialprinciple.com.
Totally. Got it. Now, I've got a final question for you. I think your answer is going to be completely different than most or what we've gotten before. So I got to know. Let's pretend for a moment that someone listening, they've listened this far and they go, you know what? I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to become that entrepreneur. I'm going to step into the greatness I feel I was born to be. But Mark, as you and I both know, when we make decisions like that, often we have a constant companion, and that companion often comes in the form of a voice that reminds us who we're not, what we can't do, how it didn't work last time, and who on earth do we think we are to try to disrupt anything and build anything. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question for you is as follows. Let's pretend that person listening this time, Mark, they're going to do it. They're going to follow through. They're going to actually do what you suggest. And they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
My suggestion would be they look at their value proposition, whether it's a product or a service, or they look at the higher level of the complete experience. And they would simply ask, how can we do it better? And now that's general. So let me give you the specifics. How can we do it more, better, faster, or differently? More is quantity, better is quality, faster is speed, differently is innovation. And if you're continually tweaking your value proposition, and again, going back to what we talked about earlier, not looking for ways to spend money and buy more equipment. You may need to do that, but start with what can we do to outthink rather than outspend our competition? Get everybody on your team thinking about how can we do it a little bit better in ways that are valued to our customer and our potential customer, and your business will continue to grow.
Yeah, I got it. I like it. I knew it was going to be. That's why I was like, I got to ask this one. I can't wait to hear the answer. I definitely appreciate your unique take in the fact that you're challenging us to actually consider, A, do we even want to get better? But more importantly, letting us know that we can always get better and coming up with a plan and a purpose and a way to help us do that very thing. And I definitely want to say I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge, your insight, as well as your wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
Oh, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? That means marksanborn.com. Why? Because you know that you want to find out that entire list of what you can do to make sure that you are exercising every bit of the potential that you have been given. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to step into the greatness that you were born for, and now you have a way, a path, a method to get there. It's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.